Hey there, I'm Rob Lang and I'm the CEO and founder of Farm.One. Farm.One is a vertical farm in the heart of Manhattan, and we grow all kinds of crazy produce for chefs. And what we do is we grow that in a controlled environment year round. One of the things I'm going to do first is just sanitize my hands. One of the things that we really focus on here is food safety, and also controlling an environment so that we can grow these amazing plants year round, whatever the weather is outside. So let me take you on a little tour, a little secret tour of our facility here, and come down and you can see what's going on. So you might be able to see all around me, there's all kinds of lights, there's lots of plants, there's flowers. You might be able to hear some sounds as well of the hydroponic equipment that we have in the farm. So I'll start off by explaining a little bit about that technology. And so you might have heard of hydroponics before, but what it really means, it's not very complicated. It just means we're growing plants in a water-based nutrient solution instead of soil. And hydroponics is something that's been around for close to 100 years in some form, and the research behind it has gone back through hundreds of years as scientists have really tried to figure out how do plants grow and what do they need to thrive. And now in this modern environment, we're using all kinds of technology to help plants thrive, including some simple stuff like these trays that you'll see here, but also some more complicated things like these LED lights behind me that kind of mimic the sun. And so just starting off here with these trays, you'll see if you look around the farm, there's trays everywhere. There's lots of water flowing everywhere. And what we do at Farm.One is we kind of try to move that water in the right way and give it the right nutrients so that plants survive. So if you look into one of these trays, actually what I'm going to do is lift up one of these things. And you'll see there's a raft with all kinds of roots from these plants underneath. And those roots are sitting in a tray of water. This is a big tray right here. And we call this system a deep water culture. And what that means is obviously deep water. And it means that there's water in there that has nutrients. It's also being circulated the whole time. Using pumps. We also oxygenate the water so that it's giving oxygen to the root zone of the plants. And we actually flow this water all the way around our systems so that we can keep it in the system and so that we're not losing water. And one of the things about traditional farming is obviously that you have to irrigate the land and you have to make sure the plants are healthy even if there's a drought. Whereas in hydroponics, you can actually contain that water, which is what's great. So often people say that hydroponics farms can use up to 90% less water than a traditional farm. And so if you're looking at a situation like a drought or a city that consumes a lot of water, these kinds of farms are actually great. We can really be efficient in them. But you can see that we've got these crazy plants here. These are actually yarrow. Yarrow is a plant that you might recognize, it'll grow in the wild, and actually it's quite popular to use it as a kind of antiseptic. Particularly the leaves. You can also make a tea out of it, or you can use these flowers. And we sell a lot of these flowers to often pastry chefs in the city. These flowers tend to be pretty strong in flavor, a little bit bitter, so they work really well with something really strong and sweet. And that's just one example of the kind of plants that we grow in here. But you can see in this deep water culture system, we've got these plants, we've got some dianthus actually next to us over here. And then below, we've got some bachelor buttons, and all kinds of stuff. So you can see that, this system allows us to grow a lot of different plants. And so if you're ever able to come and visit Farm.One, you'll be able to taste a variety of different things, even from this one system type. So the next thing I'm going to show you actually is another system that we have here. So what we do on the farm at Farm.One is we grow pretty much everything from seed, which means we're planting hundreds and hundreds of seeds every day. It's one of the most labor-intensive parts of the farm. And we plant in all different kinds of ways. And so what we'll do is we'll have a little closer look over here. And you can see just here some of the variety of things that we've got going on. So where to start? I think what I'll do is I'll show you some little plants at the back here. You might want to get even a little bit closer just to see those guys. And this, some people, might recognize, this is actually a lemon basil. So it's got some of that characteristic shape of basil where you get that branching structure. But what it has is a little bit of a lighter color. It's still really pretty. It's got that kind of lime green color going on. And then I wish you were here to smell this, but you can actually really, really smell it even when you just pick it straight off the plant. And it's got kind of like a lemon sorbet kind of scent going on. And yeah, really nice taste. And I would say this is one of people's favorite things on the farm. What do you think, Paige? Paige is operating the camera behind us there. This is one of my favorite things. But
lemon basil is definitely one of my favorites.
yeah, that's pretty cool.
Delicious.
Super fresh. So that one's really great. That you can tell it's not a very, very young plant. It's not something we just planted. It's been around for a few weeks, whereas just in front of it here, we have a few of our microgreens, and we have some really young plants. And so in this patch over here, you'll see this is a Rambo radish. So actually, just like the radish that you might buy, but we'll sell this as a microgreen. And you can actually see on these tags as we go around, you won't be able to spot all of them, but these tags will show you some information about the plant. So this is the type of plant, this is the customer it's going to. The Dutch is a great restaurant in Manhattan that we sell to. And then some information about the growing recipe, which will say, for instance here, this was just planted on the 9th of March. For us now, filming this, it's about 10 days ago. Oh no, I'm wrong. That's about 3 days ago. Yeah, that's my date. So you can tell it's already sprung up in just 3 days. And then we're going to be harvesting that in a couple of weeks' time. So, that's something that's already growing really fast. And we call that a microgreen. And, I started off by talking about the system that we have here. We're growing microgreens and young plants in a system that's called a flood and drain system. And if you think about those words, you can kind of imagine what it's going to be. It's something that floods up water and then it drains down again. And it does that on a timer. So it does that normally about 5 times a day. And the reason we do it that way for young plants is that we want plants to have access to water. Everyone knows that plants need water to grow, but they also need access to oxygen, and we don't want to just drown them in the water. So we need a system that's going to give them periodic access to water, and it's going to allow them to thrive. And so if you visit any kind of hydroponic farm, you're pretty likely to come across a system like this, where you're doing flood and drain. Some people call it ebb and flow as well. But yeah, that's something we use. And obviously here you can see on the farm, we're stacking these layers of flood and drain. So there's actually, what do we got? We got 6 here. And this is one of the reasons why, vertical farming is kind of attractive, right? Because you can stack a whole load of growing area into one space. So a few of the other crops we've got going on here. This one here, I really like. It's got an amazing smell. This is one of the reasons why it's cool to come and visit the farm, because this stuff smells amazing. This is a lemon gem marigold, and you'll see these little delicate leaves. Chefs love these because they just taste and smell amazing, but they're so small and delicate. So you can use them on a plate and be very kind of precise about them, but also get some great flavor as well. It's so good. So these guys are really young. This is the kind of plant where we could grow this out to a big size, or we could harvest it like this. It's kind of at our option. And so now you understand a little bit about how these systems work. Just want to tell you a little bit more about the nutrition for the plants and how we keep those guys healthy. So, one of the, so I'm still finishing off this lemon gem marigold. But one of the things about growing plants outside is, in a way, you're getting nutrition for free. Like you put a seed in the dirt and it's getting access to nutrients in the dirt and it's staying healthy. But, one of the things about it is you can't really control that. And so if the soil doesn't have enough nutrients in it, or maybe it's over irrigated or under irrigated, or maybe it's too acidic or too alkaline, the plant might not be healthy. Whereas what we can do in hydroponics is we can really say, hey, I want the plants to get exactly this, and I want to make sure they're healthy all the time. And so this nutrient solution that's flooding and draining down in these trays is actually full of nutrients. And so what we use at Farm.One, we don't really like using heavy chemicals or artificial fertilizers. What we use is almost like a compost tea. So if you've ever made compost and you kind of squeeze it out, you'll get this really murky, kind of disgusting, sometimes smelly liquid. But that's actually full of nutrients, and plants love that stuff. So our nutrients are pretty similar to that. And what we'll do is we'll test the levels every day, and we'll see if they got too much of one thing or too little of another. and we'll balance it. And we'll also balance the pH. So that's the acidity or the alkalinity of the nutrient solution. And you can look up a bunch of stuff about that online, but suffice to say that if the pH is right, the plants will be able to access the nutrients more easily. And if the pH is wrong, it will only be able to access maybe, say, iron or phosphorus. And so its nutrition will get out of whack. It's a little bit like a human eating donuts only and, no greens or no potatoes or no carrots. You'd be a little bit unhappy, right? So, or I would be anyway. So, so what we do is we try to keep that in balance. So that's some little bits there about nutrition. And, at Farm.One, we have deeper classes where we can tell you all about that kind of stuff. And a lot of people just love geeking out on all the details of hydroponics. There's loads of great books out there. It's definitely something that really attracts people who've got a little bit of a scientific mind, because it's a great way of kind of controlling how plants grow and giving them, really making sure they're healthy. So what we'll do, actually, I want to just taste this because this is one of my favorite things. You'll see these guys right here. Some of you might recognize this plant. It's one of my personal favorites. It's called nasturtium. And nasturtium has this sort of really nice graphical shape to it. It's almost like a hexagon or octagon. And it's got a pretty nice spicy taste, So tastes a little bit like a radish. Sometimes it's quite spicy. I like it a lot. And like, if you wanted to know how to use that, you can use it in many different ways. Sometimes, I like it with something more with a creamy taste, so that spiciness matches really well. Other people would place it on top of a soup. It looks almost like a lily pad. It's pretty cute. You can even use that in a dessert. It's used in a lot of high-end Indian food, which I love as well. So really versatile kind of thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk back a little bit, and I'll show you a little bit about how the farm works and how we actually get around. So you'll see now that you've got like a little bit of a wider view. We've got these different racks here, and you might recognize these kinds of things from, for instance, a library. So people use these when they really want to get as much storage as possible. So these things actually move, and one of the characteristic things about Farm.One is that we move these racks around and they give us a lot more space. So if you see that, we've designed the whole thing so that it works while moving, which creates some kind of complicated plumbing, but we figured it out. And the racks, now there's another aisle for us, and that gives us way more space, about 30% more space in this room than if we didn't have the moving racks. And just to tell you a little bit more about this farm and how we got started, we are in a really tight space. So we're actually in a basement. We're in a basement of a really strange, unusual building in Tribeca. And Tribeca, if you've never been to Manhattan, it's a really busy part of town. It's actually a really fancy zip code. It's very expensive for people to buy property here. But there's lots of interesting stuff here. So the building that we're in was actually built in 1865. So it's like a Civil War, American Civil War building. It's got, behind us, we've got columns which kind of show the original architecture. The building is this crazy maze. So if you want to come and visit us, you have to take an elevator down to the first floor, and then you go past a vet. If you went too far, you'd end up in a dog swimming pool, which is the cutest thing ever. When you get out and you see the dogs coming out of the swimming pool, they go onto these big fans and they're like getting dry. It's the cutest thing ever. So we're in this crazy building. And also what happens to be in this building is a 2 Michelin star restaurant called Atera. And Atera is really one of the best restaurants in the city. They serve a beautiful tasting menu, which is the kind of thing which, if you've got 3 hours to spare and something really exciting to celebrate, it's an amazing place to go. The chefs will literally serve you directly. It's almost like a sushi counter experience with beautifully plated dishes. And that's the kind of cuisine that often this sort of produce is served on. So you've got all these kind of things going on in this building. And we're really here trying to maximize the space. And that's why we use this technology to give us as much growing space as possible. But also, we're just trying to be innovative and growing things in a new way. And so, to tell you a little bit about the history of Farm.One, my background is really originally not in agriculture. I didn't grow up on a farm or anything like that. I'm actually from a tech background. But when I left my previous company and I was living in Japan, weirdly enough, I kind of wanted to leave Japan. I was kind of done with that. But also I'd become excited about food. And so I was taking a few culinary classes. I was discovering how to use these kinds of ingredients, and I was going to farmers markets all the time. But I was realizing that, really the seasons are a big limit sometimes for chefs, especially if you're living in a place that doesn't have the best access to local food. And so I wanted to see if I could use technology to try to grow some of these things year round. And I thought that chefs would be an interesting type of customer to work with. And you may, if you've heard of vertical farming, have come across bigger farms that are growing salad greens or the kind of things that you might see in the supermarket. I wasn't so interested in that mass market. I was much more interested in growing things for interesting chefs and in growing things that they couldn't get, and trying to come up with a way to serve chefs year round, whatever the season and wherever they were. So that's kind of how I came up with the idea of Farm.One. And I'm really a technology guy, so I want to figure out how to do this stuff, even if no one's done it before. So, that started a lot of hard work, a lot of figuring out. And at the beginning, I managed to move to New York and get a prototype farm, a really small farm, inside a culinary school here. And that culinary school is called ICE. And we built a very small farm there to kind of test out the idea of, do chefs want this kind of stuff? Can we grow things using hydroponics that's going to be tasty? That's like a big thing. And then, can we sell it? Can we deliver? All that kind of stuff. And after a few months, we managed to do that. We got some really good customers. We got some great chefs on board, including Chef Ronnie from Nepatella, which is in the same building as us now, because he said, hey, I've got this space. Do you want to build a bigger farm there? And we said, yeah. So in early 2017, that's what we did. We started building here, putting up all this equipment, figuring out some of this new technology. And really, trying to see if we could make this whole thing work. And so now it's 2020. We're kind of 4 years old as a company. And in that time, we've managed to grow, many, many different things. And we now serve about 40 different restaurants in Manhattan. And they tend to be really some of the best restaurants in the city. And the team's done an amazing job to get us to that point. And to show you just a few more of the things that we grow and serve to those restaurants, this guy right next to me is one of my favorite things. You might sort of recognize it if you look down the bottom. It sort of looks a little bit like something you'll get in the grocery store, which would be a green fennel. This is actually called a bronze fennel. And as you can see, it's got this really nice, really pretty, bronzy, sort of darker brown appearance. And these fronds are really delicate. They're not chewy. They taste really nice. So they're like an anise, really sweet kind of flavor. And also we grow them for the crowns here. And these are super cool as well. So if you've ever had fennel seeds, some people hate fennel seeds. My girlfriend hates fennel seeds. So we don't use them a lot at home. But if you have fennel seeds, even on like a pizza or something, but often in Middle Eastern cooking, you'll find them a lot. I love them. They actually come out of the flour here. So these will turn into fennel seeds imminently. And they also just have a really nice sweet taste as well. And this is like a great example of something that we love to grow because it's pretty small, it's pretty delicate, but it's got so much flavor. And I think that, one of the things that I've loved learning about fine dining and the work that chefs do at some of the great restaurants in New York and around the world is, I think that unless you experience some of these things, you might think, oh, it's too delicate, it's too fussy, like these chefs are not creating like homely food, it might not taste that great. Whereas what happens is that chefs at a really high level are really have amazing palates. They're choosing ingredients super carefully. And they're choosing things like this where you might even just have 2 of these or 3 of these on a plate, but it's going to work with another ingredient, like pairing this with grapefruit, for instance, works really well. People love fennel with fish, for instance. Pairing it in that way is going to enhance this dish and give you a flavor sensation that you've never had before. And for me, that's been one of the most rewarding things about doing Farm.One and building this company is that we get to work with amazing chefs all the time. And they use our ingredients in completely new ways that we would never have expected, And even like chefs just get obsessed about this stuff to the point that I'm seeing this here. This is called a Mexican marigold or Mexican mint. We've had a chef come in here who we were showing this to, and he rolled up his sleeve and he showed us he has a tattoo of this product on his arm. So it kind of shows you like how obsessed these guys get with it. So let's see what else we got going on here. And I think Paige is going to ask me some questions if I forget to tell you guys some important things as well. This is one of my favorite things. So you might, if you grow a lot of houseplants at home, you might recognize this guy. I'm going to choose a not perfect leaf so that our sales team doesn't get mad at me. But this guy is called a purple oxalis. And you can see if you had a perfect leaf, you wouldn't see any of this damage here. So this is something we wouldn't sell to a customer. But the purple oxalis is part of the oxalis or sorrel family. So people commonly call it sorrel. And sorrel is like a common word really for sour things. So actually if you're living in Jamaica, you'd have a sorrel drink. It's actually a hibiscus sourness instead of like an oxalis sourness, but that's how people call a lot of sour things. And the reason I like this is it's got that amazing sour taste. This is going to make my eye like water, I think. Yeah, it definitely did it. Because it's got this oxalic acid there. And the oxalic acid is, promoting that acidic taste. So the cool thing is about this kind of thing that chefs, when they talk about putting together a dish, they'll often be trying to balance these different flavors. So it might be saltiness, sweetness, sourness, bitterness, sometimes spiciness. So there's even a book called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, which has become pretty popular, which describes some of those things. So a chef might look at this ingredient and say, hey, this is kind of cool because if I want to get an acid taste, instead of using like a vinegar or maybe like a lime juice or a lemon juice, I've got another option now. I can use this which is sort of appears like a plant, but it's going to give you that acidic taste. So if you've got something that's really fatty, I've seen people use this on a duck dish, for instance, lots of fat in that dish, really kind of rich. You might use this to kind of cut through that. Or you might use it on a sweet dish, like an ice cream even, where it's more creamy and more sweet, and you might want to cut it through it like almost like a lemon sorbet kind of taste as well. So this sort of has this like grape skin acidity and this cool look that makes chef really love it. So there you go. I'm gonna give this to Paige. There you go. And so that's just one of, as I mentioned, we're growing many different things on this farm. So at any one time, maybe between 60 to 100 different plants. And then it gets really even more crazy because we're selling different sizes of leaf of those different plants as well. So a chef might say, I need a 1.5 inch shiso leaf. And I need it like that every day. Whenever you deliver it, I need it, spring, summer, it's got to be exactly the same. And that consistency, it might sound a little bit crazy, but when you come to something like the Michelin Guide, which is one of the most respected ways of evaluating restaurants, it's a bit traditional. Some people have their opinions about it. But one of the things they do, which I think is really important, is that they evaluate consistency. So it means that if you visit a restaurant on a Tuesday afternoon when it's not that busy, or if you visit on a Friday night, you're going to get the same quality of food every time, and it's got to reach that really high bar. And for chefs to be able to do that, they need to be able to know if they're using like a bronze fennel or something, I'm going to get that same leaf size, which is going to give me the same taste. It's going to look good every time, and they need that of all their produce. So that's why people go crazy to try to get that Michelin star, because it's really hard. And we just really try to help them to do that. So I'm going to show you a little bit more of the farm as well. So as you can tell, we probably spend a lot of the day like moving these things back and forward. But we like them, they're pretty easy to move and they're pretty sort of efficient. So come around with me and let's see what else we got. Oh yeah, down here is some really cool stuff. So probably, out of all the people watching this, no one's going to guess what this is. What it is actually is a special kind of cilantro. It's called a confetti cilantro. And the reason it's called confetti cilantro is, if you can see it against my hand, these leaves are in this weird sort of quite spindly kind of shape. And we grow it a lot for the flowers, and you can see behind us here, there's a lot of flowers going on. And those flowers have a similar, really close to like a normal cilantro taste, maybe a slight difference. They're really delicate, but they have that really nice, fresh cilantro flavor that most people love. There's a certain percentage of people who really hate it, and I respect that. We definitely don't force people to try that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's an example of something that's a little bit different to what you might have normally seen. And behind it over here, we've got another thing. And again, you might think, oh, this looks a little bit like mint, or it looks maybe like basil. It's actually one of the, I don't know, up to 20 different varieties of basil that we grow. And this guy's called a blue spice basil. And it's called that because it's got a really sort of, smell this page. It's got this crazy kind of slightly spicy, bubblegummy, like cinnamon aroma. It's really weird. And it's kind of sweet. So it's almost like a berries kind of experience going on. And we love it. It's got also like a slightly spicy taste. Really unusual. And yeah, it's one of our most popular things. And that's the cool thing about basil, is that people have been breeding basil into these completely different varieties for hundreds and if not thousands of years. And so the Genovese basil that you'll get on Italian food, that's one type. There's the sweet Thai basil that you'll get in Southeast Asia. There's something like this, which doesn't really have a specific country, but it's got some, interesting, I would say maybe Middle Eastern kind of flavors, or, maybe Asian flavors, but it's got some really, I don't know, exciting elements to it. And there's also like purple basils. There's maybe, oh yeah, behind us here, we've got a Pluto basil. This guy, really nice, really compact leaves. You've got this kind of clove, cinnamon thing going on. Really, really exciting. So lots and lots of cool stuff here. And I'm just seeing more stuff, actually, that I love. This is the cool thing about working here, is that it actually changes all the time. So 1 week, literally, it might be a completely different selection. There's a guy down here that I really like. This is called Nepatella. And this is actually one of the, it's the first plant that we sold. So Nepatella is a plant from Tuscany. And it's characteristic of these little pink flowers. And sometimes they're white as well. You can see some white ones behind us. And they're brilliant because there's such a tiny flower. I mean, it's not even the size of my fingernail. And it's got a really strong mint aroma to it. And so if you use it on a dish, you can smell it, but also you can taste it, even that little bit of mint. And so we've seen all kinds of customers just get excited about that, because they can use these very, very delicate little flowers on a little dish and really, transform the dish, which for a diner, it's really exciting, So that's one of our favorite things. And actually behind it, there's another cool thing as well. If you're a gardener, you'll probably recognize this guy. It's got this really weird sort of leathery, shiny vinyl kind of leaves. This is called a begonia. And we'll sell this for the flowers mainly. You can buy the leaves as well. And the flowers are really sour. So even more sour, I would say, than the oxalis that we looked at. But yeah, this is something that you can find in your garden. And we have a lot of people who come and visit the farm who are keen gardeners, and they kind of don't realize that they can eat this stuff. And I would say that, as long as you're not using pesticides in your farm, in your garden, and as long as you're taking care of your plants, you should try, some of these things that are edible. So yeah, lots of really cool stuff here. And as I said, like, the selection really changes all the time. And the reason it changes all the time is that we're really growing everything to order for chefs. And growing to order means we sit down with a chef, we look at their menu, they talk about what do they want to do over the upcoming season. Normally, good chefs are working at least, to change the menu 3 or 4 times a year. Often it might be even more regularly than that. And they're doing that because they're working, it's kind of weird. They're working with people like us who are sort of without seasons, but they're also working with the local farmers markets here in New York. Great farmers markets, great farmers. If you ever visit New York, I really encourage you to go to Union Square Farmers Market or other ones. But chefs are working with those seasons and also just trying to change things up, trying to innovate. And so we'll sit down with the chef, we'll introduce new products that we've grown. We do a lot of R&D here. And we'll talk to the chef and we'll say, what's going on, what are you trying to do? And they'll maybe share us some dishes that they're working on, or they might just have a really specific idea. One of the cool things about New York is it's such a cultural city where people might have come from Mexico or from Denmark or from wherever, and they might have been able to forage for something back in their home country, and they don't know how to get it. So we're able to say, hey, we can just grow that for you, and we'll work with them to grow it specifically for their menu. And so that means that the whole time, as chefs are changing, this whole farm is changing, and that's what's really, really cool about it. So I think Paige might have a couple of questions for me to try to cover some things I might have forgotten on this tour, but we're nearly there, I think.
What's a normal day on the farm like?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. What's a normal day on the farm like? So we start really early. As you can imagine, all farmers start early, and we're no exception, even though we're under LED lights and all this kind of stuff. Normally people are getting here around 6 to 7 a.m. They're going to start off on the harvest, and that harvest is a long list of items that chefs have requested that day. So we deliver actually 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and we deliver everything ourselves. And so we need to know that everything's ready by a certain time in the day for it to go out directly to chefs. And so there's the first few hours of the day are spent in a big rush, harvesting everything, and then we'll start to get ready for planting. And so just as we've got a long list of things to plant, we've got a long list of things to harvest, and that day is sort of spent juggling those two things. The team will start planting, and then the rest of the day is more about plant care. So that sounds really nice. Sometimes it's not as nice as it sounds. Sometimes it's emptying out a raft, putting things in compost, cutting things back, but there's a plant care process. And then in the evening, we're normally doing tours and classes and events, maybe a cocktail class. Maybe we'll do what we call our edible bar, which is where we bring a tray almost like this, but covered in different plants to an event. And people can have cocktails with it and garnish and that kind of stuff. That's really fun. So it's really a 12 to 16 hour day in total. Lots of hard work on the farm.
What's your favorite use that you've seen for a Farm.One product?
Favorite use? Oh my God. Well, I might have to show you a different product to answer that question. So we've got this really weird thing here. I'm going to just ask, if you saw this in the rainforest, would you want to eat it? So it's this guy over here. This is something that's really kind of controversial and like weird, and like not many people like it, but they get very strong reactions to it. So if you saw this, you would probably say like, I probably shouldn't eat this, okay? Because it's got red and yellow and it's a weird bulb type thing. This thing that you're looking at right here, it's a plant called Acamella oleracea. It's colloquially known as toothache plant, or sometimes a buzz button. Some people call it a Szechuan button, an electric button. You might be getting a sense of like what it tastes like. And actually this thing that looks like a bud, it's not a bud, it's called an inflorescence. It's actually got hundreds or thousands of tiny little flowers in there. But that bud, what it has is, it has an active ingredient, some people call it spilanthol, which will numb your mouth and give you a sort of pop rocks, like buzzing sensation. This is what I'm saying. Some people like it, some people really don't like it. And so when we bring people to the farm, we try to give people a little warning that they're going to go on this kind of roller coaster ride. And it's really crazy. It seems to depend a little bit on the pH of your mouth. It depends on, how dry your mouth is, what kind of effect you're going to get. Anyway, I know I'm going to answer the question, which is, what's the most interesting use of the product? There's a chef actually around the corner from our farm here in Tribeca called Mark Forgione, and his self-named restaurant, Forgione, uses this. They'll use a very specific amount of it in a starter, and they use a fish called hiramasa and an avocado puree and some acidic taste of that as well. So you'll start off with this, which will kind of set your mouth buzzing, and then you'll kind of calm it down with the acid and then the smoothness of the avocado. And he does a vegan version of that dish as well. So that's a really cool usage. I've also heard of people using this with shots as well. A bit of a different end of the spectrum, but people will take a shot and maybe have some of this instead of a lime or something. So rather than me, but like there's some interesting things you can do with it.
Last question, but one we get a lot from tour guests. How sustainable is this style of farming? Like how, especially Farm.One's procedures, how does that translate to sustainability?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that, one of the things that we try to make sure of whenever people visit or they talk to us about the farm, people come in with an assumption that everything that's new is more sustainable. And really, we like people to leave with the knowledge that, it's complex, right? So there's some things we're doing here that are really great. So we're saving a lot of water compared to a traditional farm. We have almost no food miles. Like, we're not shipping things across the country. When you go into a grocery store and you pick up that salad green, that's probably come from California or Mexico or somewhere a long way away. So we eliminate that because we're working directly with chefs. And everything we produce in terms of waste is compostable, and that stays in the New York City ecosystem. That's amazing. But at the same time, we use these lights. These are on 18 hours a day. They're very efficient LED lights. This whole strip is using about 100 watts. And so if you remember those incandescent 100-watt bulbs that were putting off less light, this is way more efficient. But we do use a lot of power here. We source it from renewable sources, and we're confident that's the best thing for us to do. But you've got to be conscious of that. And so I think that the best thing when you're looking at farming is thinking about that overall picture. And I think this kind of farming makes a lot of sense for leafy greens, perishable items. Doesn't really make so much sense for something like potatoes or grain, where you can use the earth's resources and the sun. So that's the way we kind of like to look at it. Yeah.
How can people come visit the farm?
We love people visiting the farm. So we're in downtown Manhattan. You can't really get more accessible than that. And if this little tour has kind of whet your appetite, it's really easy to book online. Just come to our website, Farm.One. There's an events section on there, and we're always doing new cool stuff. So we do a tasting tour like this. It's like this, but you get to actually taste, so it's a little bit better. We give you a little free glass of Prosecco. And then beyond that, we also do these custom cocktail classes as well. We work with an amazing bartender he's more of a mixologist, actually. He's like a crazy guy who'll go around and he'll work with you to pick plants on the farm, work those into a cocktail. It's a really cool experience. And then we also do that class as well. So you can learn all the science about all this stuff. You can learn how to put together a little system yourself. And it's great fun. We have this really nice community of people who've come and visit. And there's loads of plans that we have for the future as well. So we would love for you to come and visit because you really got to taste. That's the trick. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope it's been fun, and we'd really love to see you on the farm.